Hello, everybody. It's Marci from wavesofcommunication.com. Welcome to another episode of the Language Facilitation Helpline podcast, and thank you for tuning in today. The fastest results come when you enjoy the process of language facilitation. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Waves of Communication channel and the Language Facilitation Helpline podcast. I have an amazing spotlight interview for you today with a woman who goes by the name Magic Barclay, and she is here because she has raised two young adult sons who were not talking and are talking now.
Thanks for having me, Marci. It's so good to be here. Well, my family now are nearly 21 and 23, and my wonderful boys were born with the autism spectrum in their lives. So I had one that was constantly sick. My eldest was constantly sick, lots of infections, and he was a talker. But no one else understood what he was talking about because he was an advanced talker, advanced reader, taught himself to read by one, very high IQ, but no emotional quotient. So you could stub your toe as a parent and he would look at you and go, well, if you're going to cry, you should be outside with the dog because that's not inside behavior. He wouldn't ask why you were crying, what happened, because he just didn't care. And that was how he was built. 2 years later, his little brother pops along, nonverbal, non-mobile, low-functioning autism. And, this was my eye-opener. First, I had one that I pretty much didn't have to teach anything to. No communication needed there. He was communicating with me. And then I had one that couldn't communicate. And I'm happy to say, I'll talk about him more in this episode, but I'm happy to say he is now almost 21, planning his 21st birthday, walking, talking, looking for jobs, able to communicate. We do live action role play. He actually leads our war band now. And this was the kid that doctors said he's never going to say mum.
Wow. And so the first thing I want to do, Magic, is congratulate you on the work that it has taken to orchestrate this development, facilitate this development, because I know that you've realized, just like my audience is many of them are in the process, but most of them have already realized that they can't make their kids do anything, right? It's about equipping them to do their best with what they have and empowering them to excel even whatever is going on. So I love your tenacity and I love how that was going on. But I really want to know, I'm sure my audience does too, a little bit about how you made that happen. So when your kids, how old were your kids when you really decided that it was time to really look at solving these problems or what was going on? How old were the boys when you started really taking action?
Well, actually, my oldest was probably about 2 3/4. The youngest was about 3 months. And that's when the doctors said, he's never going to walk. He's never going to talk. He'll never run to your arms. He'll never say mummy. Like, deal with it. This is what it is, We'll
wow.
put
And
him
he
in
was
a
only
wheelchair.
3 months old. He was only 3 months old. And they were
3 months
giving
old.
that dismal outlook. And
Yeah.
just for everybody who's watching, Magic lives in Australia. So coincidentally, both of the interviews that I'm doing this week are with people who live in Australia. I believe that the language facilitation movement is really going to take off there because of the experience that Magic had to go through. And I know that she also has a platform where she shares ideas and strategies for people to help with their own recovery. But I really want to dig into your late talking journey. So now your kids are obviously toddlers. This was almost, decades ago. What kind of community resources were available for you then when the kids were so little?
Very little. So, it actually took about a year of being in and out of the Children's Hospital here in Melbourne with my youngest one, like every week. And they were saying, oh, it's this virus and it's this and it's that. Put him in a wheelchair and, all this kind of thing. And after a year, we qualified for it's early learning help, and there was a organization called Noah's Ark. And I didn't know at this stage that my eldest had Asperger's, right? I didn't know anything about autism or anything like that. So here I was with one child that couldn't move, couldn't talk, couldn't do anything, and then another child that I didn't understand because it was like Einstein running around in a 2.5-year-old body.
Right.
And so we went to Noah's Ark, and for early intervention, that's what it's called. And so my youngest son was enrolled in early intervention because there you could get speech, you could get OT, you could get physio subsidized, and they had like a toy library, so you didn't have to buy toys to try and work with your special needs child. You could borrow them. So we went to Noah's Ark, and my youngest one fit straight in and was, making some friends, and they were all on the play mat together and just lying there and, babbling, whatever. My eldest had a meltdown, and this was the key. So he had a meltdown, and the lady that ran Noah's Ark put her hand on my shoulder and said, gotta love those Asperger's syndrome meltdowns. And I said, what? Wait, what? No, he does this all the time. Like, what?
Yeah.
So she introduced me to what autism spectrum was. And she said, now that we know what this is and we'll get him diagnosed, now we know what we're looking for in his younger brother. And that was really the key. Thank God he had that meltdown, because then we explored what was going on. And it turns out my younger son was not low functioning at all. He was high functioning, and high functioning autism was his diagnosis. And that gave us something to work with. Now, it was through Noah's Ark and through the lovely people there that we could sidestep the services. So the standard services were speech, where they do very minimal, very basic things, and certainly not for two children in the same family who are at opposite poles of the spectrum. And then OT and physio, right? They're the standards, but they don't really help you move forward. I'm sorry, but they
And they
don't.
don't
They
really
help
help you
you.
at home, you know. They
Yeah,
they they're meant they have goals that are very sort of abstract. Child will stand on one
exactly.
foot for 5 seconds, or child
Yeah,
will hold a pencil, or child will clap their hands together, or things like that. They're more artificial sorts of measurements, right? Because
yeah.
therapists have to have some measurable goal, but it's not really addressing why the meltdowns are happening and what to do when they happen at home. It's really about skills training in those therapies, right? Is that what you were finding?
Exactly, spot on. And so what Noah's Ark helped me do was they actually ran, it was an experimental course called Signposts. And it was looking for signs in the communication between the parent and the child of what was going to happen next. And that was a
Uh-huh.
brilliant course. It was only a couple of weeks, absolutely brilliant. I think they've actually developed now into a proper course, but it was a trial back then. And then came the communication book. Now, this was absolutely a game changer for us. So, here in Australia, we have a program called Boardmaker. Most special schools use it. Certainly, a lot of speech and OTs use it. Noah's Ark used it. So, what that was, there'll be a picture of a set of headphones.
Right.
And so you look at the picture with your child and you say, headphones. And so you keep reiterating this word with a picture. So using visual communication. So what we did with Noah's Ark's help was we created a communication book. Now this was a folder like this thick, and it had eating, and it had sleeping, and it had daily tasks, and it had a whole lot of things, activities. And so what we taught my younger son to do was to go to the tab that was eating, right? And it would say fast food, drink, apple, there'd be a whole lot of pictures. And so we could get him to direct what he wanted by pointing to the next picture, and then the next picture, and then the next picture. So we could have a conversation like that. And I said to our facilitator, this is great. We're finally having a conversation. But what if I don't have the book with me? And it was a big, heavy folder. So, you've got to take it everywhere. And he was going to kinder
That's
with
right.
his brother, and you
That's
got
what
to take the
usually
book.
happens. Now it's even tablets. Nowadays, the same thing is happening in a tablet. They can go to different tabs, just like you had on different pages in a tablet. But I think what I'm really excited to hear next is what happens, because I think a lot of parents spend a lot of time with these books and tablets, and there becomes a time when you can sense as a parent that they need more than the book. Yes, the book is important to establish that connection, maybe at first, but there becomes, and it doesn't take very long, even maybe even 6 months' time for it to be limited. Because your kids are genius, right? As soon as they saw the picture of headphones to connect to the headphones, or drink to connect to the drink, you probably had to teach it 2 or 3 times, and then it was just habit training for them to go and get the book to use it to communicate. But I love what you said next is what happens when we don't have the book, because
Yeah,
with language facilitation, we bypass that whole process to move into what's next. And remember again, the idea, the reason that you went to those professionals and asked them, what do I do when I don't have the book, is because you knew that it's not functional long term. Like, there's no way that book has everything in it. You would have to continually be making pictures, right?
exactly. Exactly.
Forever and ever and ever. So, what happens next? All right. So, now I want to know what happened. How did you transition out? Because you don't use these books at all now anymore, do you?
No, no. So what happened next was, while we were using the book, I noticed there was a big form of communication we were missing, and that was our face. So whilst he's looking at the book and I'm watching him flick through the book, he can't see my face and I can't really
Right, I
see him.
love that. The visual of him looking down
Yeah,
instead of at your face, you saw that connection missing. I'm sorry I
yeah.
interrupted you, but I
No,
was like,
go for
"Yes,
it.
this is what I'm saying." I love that you're really I mean, I don't love that you experienced this. I love that you learned from it, right? When you
Yeah,
were like, "Wait a minute." And I think, the idea, because it really takes a lot for a parent to motivate two kids at different levels to start using a system that is outside of what those meltdowns were, because that
yeah,
was their communication before. And now you've got these, at least it's some kind of language that you can decipher. It's not screams, at least it's word representations. And how did you evolve that into more spoken language, real independent speech?
yeah. So whilst I'm watching my younger son missing my facial communication, my social communication, I'm watching my older son miss that too, right? Because he's totally working from up here all the time, not working from here. And so he was missing that. Remember, I said he had no emotional quotient
Right.
whatsoever. So he didn't understand facial expressions. But he also wasn't seeing them because we're all focused on this book to communicate with his little brother. So we found a course called Makaton. Now it's a form of sign language. Okay. And when I said eat before, that's a Makaton symbol. So what it was is we taught the whole family and we carried a smaller book with some Makaton signs that we used regularly. So if we came across someone that didn't use Makaton, they could go, do you want to eat? Or um, please or thank you. So, we started using this. And what I found was my older son could see my face. And so I'd go, crying, I'm crying. And I'd say it while I'm doing
Yeah.
it. And he'd go, oh, why are you crying?
Yeah.
Oh, because
It's
I stubbed my
interesting. So,
toe.
yeah, so for people who are listening on the podcast, she's doing the gesture of, it looks like, her finger by her
Wiping a
eye,
tear. Yeah.
crying, right? The wiping a tear. And because she was saying while she was doing the gesture, and this is the key, right, for Megaton, is you always say the
Yes.
words that you are intending. And what I also loved about it was, it wasn't just cry, cry, cry. It was, I am crying. Look at my tears. I feel sad. The whole reason for the nonverbal communication, the facial, things that you're seeing. And this, at least for a child who doesn't show that natural empathy, that heart empathy, they can do a logical deductive reasoning. Oh, you're
Yeah.
crying because you're feeling sad. That's the face you make. That's the gesture you use when you feel X or Y, because those facial expressions are the way we communicate our feelings. We don't always say, I am really annoyed. We roll our eyes, right? And so, what you learn to do, these Makaton signs, that's what they do. And all of them are performed up near your face,
Yes.
right? So that it encourages the facial expression. And what I loved is, remember, this is back in the day before there was any
This is
kind
20
of,
years ago.
yeah, before there was any kind of structure, and this was experimental stuff that
Mhm.
you were using. But what I loved about these programs that you chose, right? You didn't, the standard skills training wasn't what you were intuitively connected to. It was this more in natural, intuitive thing. Like, oh, you had to really connect with these kids intuitively in order to suggest the signs and that kind of stuff. You really had to sort of get on the same page before you pulled out the book or the
Yep.
sign. We call
Yep.
that the language facilitation zone, where even though there might not be the greatest eye contact, at least you're in the same space. You're focused on the same thing because, again, you already have had the experience of joint attention on the book. Now you can hold the picture of drink by your face, or do the sign of drink by your face and show that I don't want that drink, or that drink tastes disgusting, or I want some more of this sweet drink, or it's too hot, or it's too cold. It's not just drink. You can expand into it because you bring yourself. You literally, it's not a two-dimensional experience anymore. It's a three-dimensional experience that involves people. I love that. So the more you started doing the signs and talking, first you saw the kids imitating the signs, and then
Yep.
eventually they started imitating the speech too, right?
Well, this was the whole thing. So my eldest one was already speaking. So he
Yeah.
was getting this communication, facial communication that he didn't understand, but he was understanding it because I was teaching him. My younger one was able to sign. So, before we even looked at Makaton, we looked at Auslan, which is Australian Sign Language. That was complicated. My brain couldn't get around it. It wasn't filling the gaps. It was communication, but there was no emotions in it. So, as my younger one's learning Makaton and he's starting to sign back, something miraculous happened. We were out one day and we were at a restaurant, and so the word for finished is finished, and you wiggle your thumb around up near your face, right? So my eldest finished his lunch and he said, Mum, finished. I said, thank you. And then my youngest goes, Ninish. And we're like, what was that? He'd said his brother's name. That was all he said. And of course, he
Yeah.
said the toddler no. And we thought
Yeah.
that's as far as we're going to get. I still hadn't heard mum. It was like, just not a mum. It was
Yeah,
an
sure. So
And
interesting. Let me ask you this.
yeah,
Had he been doing other kind of vocalization? Like, the more you were connecting with these Makaton signs and showing him things in your face, and like you said, you were signing and looking, and he was kind of signing back to you, those kinds of things before he started talking. But of course, you never stopped using the words. You never stopped looking at him, encouraging that, not direct eye contact, but at least face to face communication, right? So that you're looking at him like that. And so, how did it shift? Like, once he was doing that, was he making other noises, or was he
he
quiet
was.
and
So
then the
he
speech came
was,
out?
but yeah, they weren't words. This was
Uh-huh.
the first word outside his brother's name, which he still got wrong.
Yeah.
And so, for dog, he'd say "g," like he'd get the last
Ah,
letter,
right.
because we were sounding out phonetically as well to try and teach both of them
Yeah.
how to spell, trying to do it all at once.
Yeah.
But this day in the restaurant was the first time we heard what resembled a word, and it was a complex word. So it wasn't
Yeah.
even an easy word like dog or cat. And that told me he's been inside that little body this whole time. hearing everything we're saying, wanting to say something, and finally, we've blasted off to the moon. Like, he said a
Yeah.
word.
I love it. So
Exactly.
then
And
what
yeah,
happened? Once he started, and it was it's sort of like, sometimes I like this, I make an analogy that it's like when we give the baby the ice cream for the first time. Like, they freak out because it's so cold, but then they love that it tastes so good that they want more. Was that how it was with talking?
totally. So he says, Ninish, and then he's like, what, what did I say? What happened? What was that? Like, we're all sitting there stunned. And my eldest, who's very matter of fact, said, didn't you listen? He said he's finished. And I'm like, all right, what's going on? So we go home and I'm trying to talk to him and signing away. And he goes like this, which means I'm tired. He didn't
Yeah.
say anything. So, all right, we'll listen to him. So over the next few weeks, more words came out. And they were coming out in such a way that made no sense, right?
Ah,
There's all of this going on in his brain. So we went to the zoo and we saw an elephant. And he turned around and he goes, nya nya. We're like, what's a nya nya?
yeah.
An elephant, apparently,
Yeah.
So here he was trying to do this. And
Wow.
all this time, we're going back to all the specialists that said, he's never going to say anything. He's never going to do anything. And I said, ask him what an elephant is. Point to a picture of an elephant. And so my younger boy goes, and points to
Yeah.
it. And the doctor goes, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's not proper language. I'm like,
What?
we're getting there. Give him a minute, By this stage,
Yeah.
he's just started taking his first steps. He's now like 3.5, 4, taking his first
Okay.
steps. And now he's saying a whole lot more. And it
Yeah.
still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But because he's signing to us, we're
Aha.
getting it, right?
Aha. I love that. I love
So there
that.
was that
Yeah.
communication.
And so it just then it evolves. The more you
It evolved.
understand, the more you can model, the more he tries, the better it comes, and it just evolves that's the natural language facilitation. And then
Yeah,
yeah,
what we
so
found though was the more we said what he was saying, or we said, I don't know what that is. And we were honest with him, right?
yes.
Not, yeah, you do the toddler thing, a toddler talks to you. Yeah, that's great. You don't know what you just said yes to. We said to him, I don't know what that is. I don't understand. Help me. And so that language and that trust evolved. And there was never a negative with anything he said, right? So he could have sworn, he didn't,
Yeah.
thank goodness, but we would
Right.
have gone, oh, that's a great word. Fantastic. But we
Yeah.
always made sure there was some positive feedback. And so
Right.
as he felt comfortable and he felt safe talking to us, the signs eventually dropped off, the language rose, and we had a positive experience.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that what you just talked about is the real key here because you this was definitely the Reader's Digest version, but I know that there are many, many parents who are watching and listening who have kids that are in that zone between 18 months and 4. And they are trying these things and some of them are really forcing the issue because as the kids get older, they want to push and prompt and pull and teach and correct. And that's not fun. It's not enjoyable for the mom to be always on the kid's case, correcting and getting better. But what I love is that you actually pass the responsibility back to your children to say, we care so much about what you're saying that we want you to make the effort to tell us. We don't
Yeah,
understand what this is, but we care about what you're saying and we want to know what that is. Where again, if you're just like, yeah, okay, look, listen to your words, nice job, and it never would evolve, would it? If
no,
you hadn't encouraged him, but again, it didn't evolve from you're doing it wrong, do it better. It evolved from I want to know what you're saying. So let me teach you. And then, of course, when he showed you he wanted, the blue cup, you're like, oh, you want the blue cup, as you were signing and talking and explaining those things that kind of sounded like gobbledygook. But because of the gestures and, of course, your intuitive connection, some of those words like elephant, once you heard it a couple times, see, he was training you just like you were
Yeah.
training them.
Yeah.
Once you heard elephant, that's how you knew, look, with other people, this kid's trying. And maybe when other people didn't give him credit, that's what happened. Can you talk about, now that you were working with these sort of, they were not standard, certainly back then. I know now these programs are fully developed and you can investigate them if you want, but the reality is things really changed for you. And then when you wanted to get these kids into schools and stuff, what happened then?
Okay, well, my eldest going into school was an absolute disaster. He was not for the mainstream. So he had actually been at a Montessori kinder where when he finished kinder, he was doing, so kinder is preschool. He was doing long division and multiplication. He was speaking Japanese fluently. They were working with him at his level. That's what Montessori is.
Right.
He went to prep at a government run state school, and we enrolled him in that school because their second language was Japanese. Over the Christmas holidays, they changed it to Indonesian, and we started prep. He couldn't continue with his Japanese. He didn't want to learn Indonesian because he was invested in Japanese. And they were saying, right, now you've got to do the prep stuff of 1 + 1 = 2, and let's do our times tables. And he's like, no. So
Yeah.
he went downhill at a primary school, and we struggled right through to start of grade 6. So that's the last year of primary school here, elementary school, I think it is in the US. And it was a struggle. So I had to self-teach him at home to his level, and then say, now you just go to school to try and make some friends. And of course, that was difficult for him. My youngest, I put into a special needs school. And that was a mistake, looking back at things now. But, that's where I felt he was the safest. I didn't think he'd cope in a mainstream school with limited language or developing language. And so I put him into an area where they were using Makaton and Boardmaker, so that every day he was still, increasing his communication. And what I found there was they teach in Australia, unfortunately, to the middle, to the average. And he was
Mm.
above the average. So he was above the bar. And he was in a class with kids that were running away or biting themselves or biting other people or banging their head on a table. And he wasn't that. He was trying to be like his brother and trying to be neurotypical. So he was slipping through the cracks. And this happened until his 3rd year at school. We had a fantastic teacher, our only male teacher for either of the boys. So he had this lovely teacher, Mr. Woods. And Mr. Woods understood Makaton. Mr. Woods understood teaching to the child, not to the average. So my son excelled for a whole year. And Mr. Woods turned around and said, this is not a child that needs to be at this school. He is ready for mainstream. You have to trust him. And I'm like, I trust him. I don't trust anyone else. And so the
Yeah.
teacher said, no, you trust him. He can communicate. He'll choose who he communicates with, but he can communicate, and you have to give him a chance to go the next level. So that's exactly what we did. I pulled them both out of school for a little while, and I homeschooled them. And we would go all around Australia on road trips to zoos and things. That's my youngest son's fascination, is zoos and animals. And my older son, we'd stop at the Dish, which is in New South Wales, which is, there's a movie about it. Anyway, it's how they communicated to the astronauts and things. And
Yeah.
so I would make sure I covered the science for the oldest one and animals for the youngest one. And we would travel around in the car talking, still signing, but talking.
Yeah.
And then I put my younger one into high school. And that was an eye-opener, because I thought, this kid doesn't know what he's doing. He's in a big sea, he's a little fish with limited communication, and he rose to the challenge.
I love
And,
it.
like I said, now they're young adults. And I never thought I would have to say this, but I actually have to say to my younger one, stop talking. I've had enough. And that is
Wow.
the best thing.
It is the best thing. And you know what? All you moms out there of 2-year-olds who are still in the thick of it, in that waiting period where you're doing everything you can to motivate them to make this shift, but they don't make the shift until they get motivated. And I love that you had a key teacher. I feel like, the universe brings us just the right people at just the right
Yeah.
time. And what I also love about your experience is that you learned as a mom from every place you took them. So when you took them to the Makeathon people, you learned from them and you brought those things home and incorporated them in your home. You incorporated the social skills and the facial things and the empathy training. But also, now that your kids are young adults, you accept them for who they are. Maybe
Yeah.
they're not the most conversational, chatty people about whatever, but I bet each one of them have certain topics like science or animals that they could talk your head off about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If I want to start a conversation with my eldest, who's very withdrawn, he's in his room most of the time on his computer, couldn't care less if we were alive or dead, let's face it. But if I want to start a conversation with him, I'll either start talking about politics, I'll start talking about science, or I'll start asking stupid questions about computers. Now, luckily, he's not up and he can't hear me, but he thinks I don't know how to use PowerPoint. And he can't understand why, after all these years of him teaching me how to do things on my work computer, I still have to ask for help making presentations. And the
Aw.
reason why I ask for help is because that gets him communicating in a field that he loves and he's comfortable,
And he's good
and
at it,
he's
right?
good at
Because
it. So it makes him
through the,
feel
I
good.
mean, he's probably
Yep.
by now, yeah, he's probably a expert in the
Oh, he is.
PowerPoint now.
He's an expert in all things. He codes
Yeah.
computer languages. I don't know. Languages I
Amazing.
don't know. But the reason why I play that I don't know what I'm doing with PowerPoint is it makes him feel good. And then
Sure.
we can have a conversation, and him helping me with a presentation and me sitting here going, would have been quicker if I just did it myself and didn't get the lecture from him. But there's a
Yeah.
reason why we're doing this. That then spills out to we leave my office and he'll go, hey, seeing as you're not good at things, why don't we have a game of chess? And again, he thinks he can beat me in chess because I let him. But the whole
Yeah.
time we're talking. And so
Yeah.
this is how I draw him out of his shell. Now, my younger one, the animal lover, we have a kitten, right? And so we train the kitten together. He teaches me how to train her, and I run along behind them with the treats to give her when she does the right thing. So we do that. He and I do wildlife rescue, and we communicate all the time. And do you know what? He can communicate with an injured kangaroo like no one's business. And injured anything. In fact, you know, we have animals come to the house all the time to talk to him and
Oh,
communicate with him.
wow.
And then he tells me what's going on. So we now, as adults living together, we share passions so that we can keep communicating. It's not
And I
just
think
the
it's
everyday, what
not,
do you want for dinner?
yeah, and what makes you valuable as a person, these kids, you didn't raise babies who need to be taken care of. You raised equipped and empowered adults who are helping animals, helping wildlife, helping their mom with her work and those things. And I think that is the key, right? And I think when you do it when they're little, it looks like, teaching them how to ride a bike or following them to the basketball court or, the football field or whatever they like. Or in your case, it was the zoo after zoo after zoo after zoo, or science after science after science,
Yep.
and always keeping them. This is the other thing that I love that you did. You gave appreciation for them to have smarts, right?
Yes.
You took advantage of it and you challenged them, because that's what a kid with smarts wants. They are problem solver, natural problem
Yeah.
solvers, and all they want is a problem that they can solve. It gives them value, it gives them confidence, and that's when they share their voice. Because if they're being judged, or you give them things that are too easy, that they feel like, oh, you're just demeaning, it's like patronizing, right? And your kids don't experience that, so they show up now with initiative. Hey mom, we've got to go help this kangaroo that's outside, or we've got to go, there's a koala out back telling me he's
Yeah.
hungry, or whatever. And then the other thing that I love is that you're allowing these kids, because your oldest son, with his Einstein computer brain, literally, he has an affinity for his time with his computer. He processes, he connects with that, and you use that tool to connect
Yeah.
with him. You don't say, get off your computer and go out and play, and make him try to change who he is, but you get to let who he is share with the world. When he comes to your office,
Yeah.
he knows what's going on there, because you involve him in your life. Just like when your son goes to the zoo and he sees them, in the back training, he knows what they're doing, he knows why they are, he knows, all of that stuff. So
Exactly.
now you're getting me so motivated. I can't wait. When I come to Australia, I'm going to the animal rescues,
There you
because
go.
I'm very active in animal rescue myself here in Florida, with birds and marine life. So yeah, I'm all about learning about all of that. So wow.
So look, the key with raising any child, no matter what age they are, be it 23, 21, 2, 1, whatever, is keep it positive. And I think as parents and caregivers, we can get so stuck in our own feelings about what our child is going through. That's not their business. That's our problem. Okay. So when we're communicating or teaching communication, or even just being in the same room as our child, no matter what we're going through, what we're thinking or feeling, we have to make it positive for them. So they get a word wrong. Okay. Is this what you mean? I think this is what you mean. Am I right?
Yeah.
And not, no, that's not the right word. You have to really keep it going. And I think certainly for my family, that was the key. And that was positive feedback at all times, no matter what I'm feeling.
Yeah, I think that is a very key important thing, because, I don't know if my first book is called If It Isn't Fun, It Isn't Fun. So that's the whole idea. If you're not finding that you enjoy every day, take it from Magic. The work never stops. The kids are in their 20s, and she still every day has to think about your language facilitation. When are you going to connect? Because they don't initiate that time with you. You're still having to plan out those times. And, by now it's second nature. And I love that you use the other thing that I just wanted to highlight and call out about, was brilliant about the fact that you used car trips. Now, I know towns in Australia are, tens of hours to drive between towns. So it's a very long road trip to get between big cities. And I can imagine that's a lot of time to spend to talk about not much going on outside, even, driving through desert area and stuff. But you've got a captive audience there in the car.
Yeah.
And as long as you kind of know what's going on in their minds, right? Then you can bring up topics for them to bring their imagination out into the world. So you can just be in the car driving through the bush and literally still be facilitating better spoken language like Magic did. So wow, you really shared a ton of valuable strategies. A lot of these I talk about on my platform, and it's because it's natural. These are things that came to you naturally because they felt good when you connected with your boys, and they still do today. Positive
Yeah.
always feels good, and negative prompting, it just wears you down. And I also love what you were talking about, a parent's feelings. Can you talk a little bit more about your shift, when you were back worried? What happened to make you kind of shift into this? All right, we've got this. We don't believe what the doctor said. Now we see enough improvement that we're just on the forward movement train. Where did you have that shift?
Definitely. Look, for me, I really only got married so I could have kids. I was so invested in these babies that I had this connection that there's always more for them. And it was following that was really the key. So when I was told he's never going to walk, he's never going to talk, he's never going to say mum, never going to hug you, never going to run into your arms, I was like, no, I don't feel that. I know that one day he will hug me and he will say mum. And, this was really important not to have that feeling dismissed. And same for my eldest. He gives me hugs every now and then, and I turn around and say, what do you want? Because there's usually a reason behind it. But I'll take the hug. you know,
Yeah,
it's
that's right.
just, yeah, it's just really knowing who your child is and having that bond. And I know some parents are more bonded than others to their children, but it's seeing what is capable. And if you have that gut feeling, follow it. It doesn't matter how many degrees someone has and what they're telling you. If that's not what you're feeling, then that's not what's happening. So follow your gut.
That is the best advice ever, especially today when there are many options out there. And, you know, if you get started with something and you don't feel it like it's working for you, it's okay to make a change, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think that's it. Now that there are more options for you, so amazing. Now, I know Magic, you have your own platform. That's how we found each other, that you have your own podcast. Can you talk a little bit about, because I have a feeling that my audience is also your audience. Who do you speak to on your podcast, Magic?
We speak to anyone that's interested in personal development, health, communication, family, nature. Pretty much we cover everything. And so my podcast is called A Magical Life, Health, Wealth, and Weight Loss. And so, for example, I'm a health practitioner. We don't just talk about physical health, but emotional and spiritual health. Why? Because during my caring journey, that's what I had to work on, not just the physical. And we talk about wealth, which isn't just finances, but personal and emotional wealth. And that's what I've taught my kids. It doesn't matter what your bank balance says, as long as you are a good, well rounded person that's invested in themselves and invested in what they love to do, you're wealthy. And then we talk about weight loss because during my journey of being a carer, I lost myself and I was so stressed. I became so overweight. I'm still not skinny now, but this was for me, I thought weight was the problem, but it was actually the stress that I was under and it was the health complaints that I was suffering from that led to my weight gain. So, we cover all of those and we bring guests from all around the world in. Sometimes I get on my soapbox and just start spouting off about something that, a listener might ask me a question. I'll go, yeah, okay, I'm going to answer that one. But, I love reaching out. And, all I can say to anyone listening or watching today is you have to look after you, right? So for years, I would travel with the kids, we'd get on a plane, and, the hosties would do the whole thing about the oxygen mask coming down and put it on yourself first. I would actually get cross with them because in my head, it was my kids are the most important thing in the world. They get their mask first. And it wasn't until years and years of, work on myself that I realized why you have to put the mask on yourself first. Because if you're passed out, you can't put it on the kids.
That's
Right? And this
right.
took me ages to work out. So I now work in health because what I lost during this whole life of trying to communicate with my kids and teach them communication was I lost looking after myself and I became so empty, so unwell, and with multiple health conditions because
Mhm.
I didn't look after myself along the way. So you can't just be there for your kids. You have to be there for you too.
I love that. And it's a really important message. And in fact, here's the situation. It is because, I believe, it is because you made the shift at some point, because it didn't just happen yesterday, that you decided to start focusing on your own body and, use your health knowledge or go get health knowledge to learn how to come back to yourself and take care of yourself. And when you did that, the progress in your boys probably skyrocketed, right?
Oh, it did, because I was not only treating myself, but them. And in fact, last night, this naughty kitten that we have, she has a habit of grabbing your arm and kicking and scratching and biting, and it's shredded like it's been through a paper shredder. And so last night, my younger one was playing with the kitten, trying to teach her how to sit, because she's a Siberian. So they're a bit like dogs. And she decided she was a bit overstimulated and wanted to attack his arm. And he came up to me and he goes, Mum, my arm's a bit shredded. I'm just going to go and get the chickweed wound wash that you made. And I'm going to put that on my arm because I know it's got no chemicals in it. And, that way my arm should be right. That'll kill any bacteria that came off her teeth, right? And I'm like, yeah. What else could I
Yeah,
say?
what else you just right, go get it, right? Mouth hanging open. Here's the kid that
Exactly.
was never gonna walk and talk. Here's the
Yeah.
kid that was never gonna walk and talk is now curing his own ailments through experience, right? He learned
Yeah.
naturally because the last time it happened, you didn't freak out. You stayed calm and logical because your kids are logical kids and you know that they need logical, complete explanations. And what I loved about that feedback was remember, he wouldn't know all those facts if you didn't take the time to teach him. Because some
Yeah.
moms would be like, oh, come here, let me put something on that. But that's not enough for your Einstein syndrome lay talkers. You have to explain why and how you do everything. And it's not just because that gets you through the activity. It's because that's what these guys need to grow up to be independent adults. And holla, they're doing it.
I know, right? And I do that every day. And so, this is something that's really, really important. No matter where your child is on the spectrum or on their development journey, whatever condition they're diagnosed with, if you communicate, it may feel like you're over communicating at times. But if you communicate, you are teaching, you are offering information, you are honoring your child, right? So if I'd said to him, let me take care of that, he wouldn't have learned. You're right. But I've said, hey, I've made this out of one of the weeds in our backyard. It's called chickweed, and this is what it does. And it's got a bit of yarrow in there as well, and this is what it does. And all you have to do is drip it from the bottle onto the wound, wipe it off with a clean tissue, and just let it breathe. And it will seal itself up. You'll have stopped any infection. This is what I would like you to do if it happens again. And sure enough, when it happens again, that's exactly what he does.
What
He
he
doesn't question it.
does.
He communicates it back to me because we've had that role modeling function for the past nearly 21 years
It's
together.
a habit now, isn't it? Now,
Yeah,
anytime there's a new thing, you don't just let me take care of it. It's just a habit now for you to stop and explain the why and the how.
yeah,
And now that is how you raise kids that are able to go work with other people. Like, if you're at the wildlife rescue thing, you rescue your own, but if you've got to take them to the hospital or you've got to communicate with a vet or you've got to do all that stuff, you've got to have a clear logical mind and explanation of what that's going to do. I know I take the calls at the bird rescue and these people are like, blah, 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 all, it's a wild or it's bleeding or it's this. And I'm like, calm down. We just need to
yeah,
get it straight. So it's the perfect job for your
yeah.
kids. And I love that you do it because it's super fun anyway and reassuring. I mean, they don't all make it
They're
in the
not always
animals,
happy
but
endings. Yeah.
it's not always a happy ending, but it's always a learning experience. It's
Yeah.
always a learning experience.
And
And
he can call a vet or go to the zoo and he can hand over a triage. So, this is a kid. We always joke about it. It's like the running joke in the household. Oh, but you were never supposed to walk or talk. And so he can do a triage and he might have, a kangaroo joey and he'll say, the triage handover, he'll say, Mum was hit by a car. She's been moved off the road. She had a lactating teat. I found this Joey in a bush next to her. It's about this age, it's furred or it's velvet, or he'll give the stage of development, and he'll say, I've looked for injuries. There's no obvious injuries. There's a little bit of bruising. He'll do the whole handover.
Oh,
And
I'll
I'll
bet
just
they
stand there
love it
going,
at the hospital, and
oh,
what an empowering thing for him to
yeah.
be that rescue 911, animal rescue guy. I love it. Magic, it has been a joy talking to you about your kids and your family, and I know after this recording, we're gonna connect because, yeah, when I'm in town, we're definitely gonna have to get together. I wanna meet these genius boys. Maybe they don't wanna meet me, but I kind of want to have a conversation with them because I'm really excited. Now I know what to talk about. So thank you so much for joining me. And you guys, Magic stuff is going to be in the description of this video, so you can go over and see her podcast and stay tuned to it because I think I'm going to be a guest on her show.
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Magic.
Thanks for having me.
With a whole range of Waves of Communication resources, from free content to customized coaching, you now have access to everything you need to elevate spoken language to infinite success. You are welcome to get your journey started with my 11-week language facilitation Journey to Speech workbook. You can access this workbook and all of the language facilitation resources on my website, wavesofcommunication.com.